Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone, to episode 85 with author, speaker, and happiness co-ambassador, Michelle Powell. Thank you for doing this, buddy.
No problems at all. So good to meet you.
It was. And I put an IG story up just recently, or a couple minutes ago, about how powerful your story was, especially seeing it live. And I don't think I've ever seen or heard anything like that. So I'm excited to share your courage and your vulnerability with anyone who listens or watches, because it's going to transform lives, 100%.
For sure, and that's why I'm here.
First question straight off the bat. Could you please describe the way that you view yourself as a woman? Or human?
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I now believe that I'm kind-hearted and generous, and I am totally happy with the way that I am, the inside, outside, and that I am here to help transform lives.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Seeing as your story pretty much starts in childhood, do you want to just walk us through your story and I'll just jump in and ask whatever I want to know in between?
Yeah, sure. Sure. So I was born to an alcoholic and abusive father, and that marriage ended, well, my mother's marriage ended shortly. I was only very young, so not very long after I was born. There are scars and things that I bear from childhood, both physical and mental. And my mother was sent away for a little while I lived with my grandparents. Shortly thereafter, when my mum came back and we were all living with my grandparents for a little while, my mum then remarried a lovely man who adopted my older sister and I. He took us in and cared for us as his own, and still does to this day. Unfortunately, a little while after, at the age of 8, my adopted father's brother, so my uncle, took an interest in me that was a little more than the rest of my cousins and things, and then it turned into some sexual abuse that went on for almost 10 years to just before I turned 18.
Wow. And
yeah, that was when that all came out. Obviously, when you get stressed with year 12 studies and things like that, it all changes your perspective on things. So during that period, I was amazing at school. Not that I'm by any means just naturally brainy, but I needed something to take my mind off what was happening to me, and I studied like a trooper all into the night, every night, and had amazing grades through school. And but by the time I'd finished school, because I had no sense of self, I just had no idea what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go, so I was a little bit lost in that term. So I did start doing psych at that time, but that kind of opened too many wounds for me.
Yeah.
So I then went into business and got a degree in business. So I was working in local government and had a pretty low opinion of myself, but I portrayed as a very happy-go-lucky type person. I then, when the councils amalgamated, I then met and married a man from our local area, and shortly we had a baby before we were married, but then that sort of carried on, and I had another. I was actually pregnant with twins that I lost at 22 weeks. I then was forced into becoming pregnant pretty much straight after the loss of those babies, and I had a son, James, and Then I was told that was to be the end of the children. I wasn't to have any more children and those sorts of things. But unfortunately, I had to perform my wifely duties. I was forced to have sex on a number of occasions. I wasn't really allowed to leave the house. If I did leave the house and I didn't answer the phone, or if I had snuck off to the shops, then I would get abusive messages because my then husband, if he was calling me, would hear announcements at the shops and realise that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Then on one occasion when I was forced to have sex with my husband, I fell pregnant again, which I didn't hear the end of, but I have an amazing little son out of that one. And when he was just in grade prep, that was when everything just completely fell apart. I was lying and cheating myself. I was hiding the fact that we had no money, but pretending for my own sanity and for my husband's sake that our finances were great and that his business was running perfectly. He would go off and hire employees and things, and I would just try and rob Peter to pay Paul to try and find ways to pay people. Eventually it all fell apart. There was just nothing left there, and he came home one day, and I now realised that I was drugged with sleeping tablets, and I was taken to the bank, and my name was removed from all of the bank accounts. So there wasn't much there, but I had access to absolutely nothing. I was then taken and admitted to a psych ward in the local hospital under the visor that I had attempted suicide. And I was kept in there because my ex-husband had said that I was not welcome to go back to the family home. So I had no home to go to, so they couldn't release me. They said that I was in there as a voluntary patient, but because I had, and I could, sign out and go to the shops and things like that, but I had no form of ID, I had no glasses, I had no money, I had nothing. So to even leave was very difficult for me. Then I'm not sure exactly how, but my parents came to the hospital, and when the nurse came in to tell me that my mum was there, I actually broke down and I said that I cannot see them. I can't show them how bad everything is, even though I knew my mum had gone through similar things. It was just because I felt so little of myself, I didn't want to disgrace my parents. And I still remember the face of the nurse that said to me, come on, it's your mum. And eventually I did see them, and they helped me immensely through everything, getting me out of that psych ward and that sort of thing. It's a very difficult place to be when you know that you're not actually suffering from any mental illness other than what was situational and what was going on. And my parents tried to help me see the kids, but I had no keys to the family home. My ex-husband, his parents had actually moved in to the family home. They had their caravan there and they had taken over everything. He had gotten Child Protective Services involved, who actually accused me of having Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So I'm not sure if you know what that is, no. But they're accusing me of making my children ill so that I could gain attention.
Wow.
So I did everything that they asked, and now turns out that you really, well, what I now know from that is fighting for yourself and fighting for your innocence. It doesn't really work that well, because you're frowned upon. You looked as if you're just clutching at straws. I went through 16 hours of psych testing, and those accusations were not proven. In actual fact, there was nothing proven. There was a few little scapegoats that the department tried to use by suggesting that because I had a high IQ, I was able to manipulate the psych tests that they used. So I got really frustrated because they accused me of doctor shopping, but there was never any investigation into Medicare records or anything where they would actually find the answers to those questions. So on one particular day, I had 42 text messages from my ex-husband telling me that that I was, a fat slut, and just abusive messages, and then telling me if I told the department that he didn't hurt me, he would allow me to come back to the home and to the kids. I took those messages. There was witnesses to those messages, and so someone came with me, and we took those to the police and got an AVO against him, or an intervention order. But even at that time, when the police spoke with Child Protection and told them that they were not to show those messages in any way, shape or form to anyone else, they showed him the evidence that was there, and they believed him when he said that I had obviously sent those to myself somehow from his number. So everything was against me, and he then moved away and took the children away. So I needed to follow, because I needed to make sure that my children were safe. And so I followed, but since my daughter, who is now 21, was 14, I've not seen her. I have a son who is 19, and I've not seen him since he was 14. I have another son who is 14 and a half, or going on 15, who witnessed his father coward punch his brother, and so now lives with me full time. So prior to Xavier, my youngest, coming to live with me, I found Happiness Co. And I'd been through a lot of different things. I followed the whole Tony Robbins thing and the rah-rah and spent a fortune of what I didn't have. But I also found yoga and meditation, and they were probably the lead up to me joining in on the programs that Happiness Co. have to offer. I found that my yoga and meditation is something, and the breathing is something that I could use. It didn't matter where I was. I could slow down and slow my own heart rate down and just come into myself. I stopped pleasing people. I was a massive people pleaser.
Yep.
I believed that if I could do whatever for them and make them happy, then I would be happy. So I stopped being a chameleon, basically, and started connecting with my own heart and leading with my heart, and just speaking always from my heart, speaking my truth, owning the mistakes that I made during the relationship, owning all the shame and the guilt that I felt surrounding losing my children. And I went into my first 21-day challenge. I did the challenge again, and then I completed 2 of their 10-week mentorship programs. It was shortly thereafter that Julian asked me to become an ambassador. And so that's over the past, it's been 18 months since I was asked to become an ambassador. I was then voted in as the coordinator of the ambassadors. And obviously, as you've just seen, so the last 4 weeks I've been speaking on stage with Jules and just sharing my story and hoping that I am impacting lives so people know that it doesn't matter how far they're down, there is a way. There is a way out.
And I don't think you need to hope anymore. You're definitely impacting lives. And what about you've written a book?
I have.
So how did that come about? Because I'm sure
Um,
there's a lot of people who have stories of struggle or traumatic events that they've been through and overcome that are interested in doing something like this.
yeah, I find writing very cathartic. So I journal each and every day. I write down my gratitudes, but I also write down what's happened to me during the day and what tools I might have used to get out of a slum or if I'm in a funk or whatever, just to bring myself back to who I really am. And I'd always journaled. When I was kicked out of the house, basically, all of that was gone. So I kind of needed to reestablish myself. And while I was fighting to get my children back, that was when I started putting pen to paper because I could see that the family court system was broken. I could see that child protection, as many lives as they save, they can make mistakes and they're not always correct. And I could see the mistakes that I had made in the relationship, and I needed to take responsibility for those too. So I just started putting pen to paper in a journaling type manner, and I met up with a guy at a spiritual festival in Melbourne, and he said to me, "Why don't you write a book?" And I said, "Oh, these are just all personal thoughts. I've got them down." But then when I really looked at it and I thought about it, I thought, that's just another way that I can actually impact on people. I don't expect it to ever be a top seller or anything, although I have sold 700 copies.
Wow.
Yeah. So Andrew Jobling was the person who helped me sort of frame the book out and worked with me. And then once I moved away, we remained in contact for a while. We're still in contact, but it wasn't until just before Christmas last year that I was talking to Julian Pace from Happiness Co about it. And he said, why haven't you had it published? And I said, because I'm scared. And he said, what are you scared about? And I said, it's like cutting myself down the middle and opening up and bearing my heart for absolutely everyone to see. And I said, and what if people don't believe me? And he turned around to me and said, Michelle, is it your truth? And I said, yeah. And he said, so get the fucking book published and show people how they too can grow from, just planting that seed in their heart.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah. Yep.
With that book, knowing that you were scared of publishing it because it was like bearing your soul, bearing your heart, I'm sure most people feel that way about opening up for the first time, like sharing what they're thinking or feeling, especially if it's to do with suicide or anything like that. How has publishing that book impacted you?
It has, it's actually really settled my heart. Being vulnerable has taken me to that next step, to that next level of self, I guess, of knowing that I am true, that my heart is true, and that even though I've done things in ways that I could have improved on, even though I felt such shame surrounding losing my children and those sorts of things, that by being vulnerable and allowing people to really see inside and to see who I am has made a bigger impact ever on me than the chameleon that I was.
Yeah, and I feel like for most people, because you are hiding that part of yourself, like you're hiding the truth, like in essence, you're being a fraud. And
Yeah,
so you have that internal conflict of I'm not being who I actually am. I'm wearing a mask, I'm being a fraud, and so nobody really knows me, and then you start hating yourself because of it.
yes, yep, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because the other thing that I did do was I built myself a layer of protection. I ate and I ate and I ate and I layered up that protection all over me. And I got to almost 140 kilos and then realized that that wasn't the true me either, and
Wow.
I was just protecting. So I've now lost 60 of those kilos.
Yes.
Um, and still going, but I just find it absolutely amazing how our emotional trauma can cause such physical trauma as well.
Yeah, especially if you can't acknowledge it.
Yes, yeah.
A couple questions from your story, buddy. Uh, Going back to the stuff with your uncle,
Hmm.
obviously hindsight's 2020. Um, it'd be a bit hard to understand that at the time, but looking back, do you know what the story was that you told yourself about what was happening to you?
Yeah, sure. Um, I actually felt really special, and that's one
Wow.
thing that I felt a lot of shame over. It made me feel as if I was like a chosen one, and that by doing these things in secret, uh, we didn't. I had this little secret life that no one knew about, and and even when obviously I was hiding those things from everyone, including myself, but I was also relishing on the attention that I was getting.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so had there been a lack of attention up until that point?
Um, I think it probably stemmed from my early childhood. When being born to someone who actually really didn't want anything to do with his children.
Yeah.
Um, and I think even though you have the knowing that you're in a better family life, I just also having that sense, just subliminally, I guess, that it's not your real father. And as I said before, he treated us in no way differently, but, just having that sense and that always knowing. And as kids, if one gets in trouble and the other one doesn't, it automatically would go into your subconscious. Oh, that's because
Yeah.
I'm not the bloodline.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a profound insight, feeling like you relish the attention and feeling like the chosen one, because obviously if something like that was happening to you and that's the story you told yourself, then more than likely that's going to carry on throughout your life.
For sure, for sure. And that impacted on the, relationships that I had thereafter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I think you said at about 18 you finally opened up. Was that right? About what was
Yeah.
happening?
Hmm.
Do you remember that moment at all and what you were going through and then what the reaction was?
Yeah, I remember telling my parents. I actually remember in their bedroom, they were exactly where I was standing. And when they then turned around and said, we thought something was going on, I remember feeling so sick and thinking, if you thought something was going on to a child, why on earth did you not do something about it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
And then I remember having a doctor's appointment to be checked out for my police report, and the doctor handing mum a prescription and said to her, this is for when she becomes irrational, because I was quite emotional right through that appointment and that sort of thing. So, then those little things too go into your subconscious and wondering why you ever told anyone anyway.
Yeah. And it's sort of like, I can see how that would spawn a distrust of any authority figure, like especially having your parents, you feeling like they should have protected you or they should have done at least something, and then the doctor you go to that's supposed to help telling you that at some point you're going to be irrational.
Yeah.
That's a scary world to live in when you open up about something that deep and then feel like you can't trust anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so did that impact what happened with your children's father, like not wanting to tell anyone?
Yeah, for sure. Because I had been open and told things of the past that I wouldn't be believed again, and that that I would be the person who always gets herself in trouble and those sorts of things. And because I think, during school I had tried so hard to be, the top student and that sort of thing to prove that I was worthy, I continued doing that type of thing outside where I would do, as I said before, people pleasing. I would do everything for everyone else. And people just had the opinion that I did have this great life and that I was happily married and doing really well.
So how do you deal with that conflict? Obviously, having that outside expectation that you're living the good life, that you're enjoying life, and that you should feel enough, and then knowing on the inside that you're essentially being a fraud, wearing a mask, like you said, stealing from Peter to pay Tom, and like covering up the financial difficulties as well as being forced into having sex. How did you deal with that?
Very poorly. I became a person that I didn't know, because to know me now, and as I said before, I've got a kind and gentle heart, and I had never sworn. After I got out of that marriage, I remember swearing and my mum going, "Oh my God, I've never heard you swore." And like, we're on a dairy farm, so it's thrown around a fair bit. But I always had that gentle heart, but inside, behind those closed doors, I would become very angry. And I know that, and these were the things that I carried a lot of guilt and shame about, because I was told that my husband was head of the household and that I needed to follow his direction. That was by his parents. And so when I had Kayla, she's my eldest daughter, I didn't want to use dummies or anything like that. And my husband's mother would actually tape a dummy into her mouth, and it turned out that she was actually not a well baby, and there were reasons for her screaming, but I was told by her that, I wasn't a fit parent. And then I would get tired and grumpy, and as you do with a newborn child anyway. And then even when James was a bit older, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and he could fly off the rails quite easily, and I was told that I needed to smack them, spare the rod, spoil the child, which all these things that would go against my grain, but I did do them to, to be approved into that family and to keep the peace at home.
So really, you gave up any sense of ownership over yourself, your actions, to be the
Yeah.
pleaser and fit in. Wow,
Hmm. Yeah.
that's intense.
Even in my own home. Yeah.
Have you have you been able to forgive yourself for that? Like, has that been a
Yeah.
process at all?
Yes. I carried a lot of guilt and shame, and I had worked on it, but it was only at the end of last year when I spoke with Jules about, the difference between guilt and shame and how I was carrying the burden of the guilt over myself, not being who I truly am, the guilt of staying in that relationship for so long. I was in there for almost 12 years. And the guilt of not being able to protect my children, because I was always told that if I tried to leave, I would never get my children. And in the relationship, that was all I had. I was a mum.
Yeah.
So, and that was the only thing that I felt in that relationship. So to lose my children completely broke me. But I worked a lot on forgiveness, writing down the things that I needed to forgive myself. So it was a lot of internal talk and getting into my subconscious and allowing myself to really feel that I'm truly forgiven, self-forgiveness for that guilt, and then just really working with the shame and reframing how I was looking at it.
Yeah.
Like shame over losing my children, and then reframing that so that I realized that, yes, I have lost my children, but it's given me the opportunity to grow back into the person that I truly am, so that when they're ready to come back to me, they can see the beauty that I have within me.
That's amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And anyone going through any sort of guilt or shame should take that on board.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
For sure.
with your partner and the being forced into sex, were you ever able to open up to anyone about that?
At the time,
Yeah.
no. I after everything went haywire, I did speak to people, and I guess that is why I did feel like no one believed anything that I'd said, because I had become such a good liar.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So during, like, up until that point where there's like that breakdown in that relationship, did you ever feel like you were enough?
Never.
Wow. When did that point come for you?
I love cooking, and I am an amazing cook. So we would have dinner parties and invite friends over. But while I was cooking, my hand or finger or something would be forced against a hot plate and burnt. So then when people praised my cooking, he would lift my hand up or something and say, yeah, she might be able to cook, but she's a klutz. See, she always burns herself. And again, I remember exactly where I was sitting, the people that were there, and feeling that sense of total unworthiness. I saw the faces on those people, and they would start to joke about it, but me knowing how that burn happened just made me feel completely unworthy.
So looking back, do you have an understanding of why he would do that sort of stuff to you?
I've done a lot of looking back, and it's through his own unworthiness. And I think about things that were said to him. He was told that, that he was left on the doorstep by gypsies, that he wasn't really part of the family. Their entire family was involved with the Pentecostal church, apart from him. And his mother had told me stories about her relationship with her father and how she felt that she may too have had postnatal depression, but it wasn't something that was recognised within the church, because their view was that God doesn't give people mental health issues. And she would tell me stories about how when her kids were crying and she was feeling so lonely, she would smack them so that they cried so much that they fell asleep and she could have some peace. So I do have a bit of an understanding of where he's coming from. I would love to be able to help him to move forward, but he's still stuck in that victim mentality, and as are probably all of his siblings, and they have no desire to move forward with their lives.
Yeah, it's all about environment, hey? If you hadn't got yourself into a space where you could do yoga, meditate, you never would have connected with Happiness Co, and then you wouldn't be in this position now where you've transformed your life, and now you're taking that pain, using it as purpose, and transforming others.
Yeah.
That's powerful. What have we got here? Fighting for innocence. So when you're fighting for innocence and you're being portrayed as bunny ears crazy, when you're going through this whole legal process, and he's manipulating the people around you, child services, was it hard for you not to buy in to being crazy? Because a lot of people, when they're put through that, end up believing that they are. Because, well, if everyone else believes it, I must be.
Yeah. I did have an amazing psychologist, and he too was put down by Child Protection, because he wrote to them saying that, the only thing that Michelle is suffering from is situational depression and battered wife syndrome. So he too was put down by them, and so then you start sort of crossing wires. You're really not sure what is true and what isn't. But what I found was the more you try to prove your innocence, the less belief there is in your innocence.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of moving forward, is relinquishing what other people think of you, because if you're spending so much time trying to fight that, you end up losing yourself anyway.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
So I think we touched on like the feeling of you not being enough. Did we get to the point where you finally felt like you were?
Not within the relationship ever, but now, now I know that I am, and like as near as yesterday, I stuffed something up, and being able to just go, geez, I did stuff that up, but these are the measures that I'm going to take now. So not trying to cover anything up, just being totally honest with yourself at every intersection allows you to be totally honest with everyone else.
That's amazing.
Because I have lied throughout maybe my entire life, I guess, up until the point that I got out of that marriage. That was the point when I said, I am never going to be dishonest again.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you remember that moment or that tip, tool, or tactic that helped you get to that point where it was like, okay, maybe I can stop feeling like this. Maybe I can stop feeling worthless. Maybe I am enough.
Yeah.
Because I believe like this feeling of not being enough is probably an underlying limiting belief for most people all over the bloody planet.
Yeah, yeah. My biggest belief is it's changing the people that you hang around with, changing the people that if you're hanging around with another 10 people who also think that they're not enough, you're just going to walk around in unworthiness, a group of unworthiness. But by stepping up, and it's having the courage to really go, I want more for myself. And I would use little mantras through the day, sticky notes stuck here, there, and everywhere that say you are enough or you are beautiful, or just to remind yourself all the time. But taking that step to really go, you know what? I've got to have that zero fucks attitude, because if I continue worrying about what every person around me thinks, then I'm never, ever going to be my whole self, my very best self in life.
That's amazing. That is.
It's not easy. You've really got to have the courage. It takes a lot to really stand up for yourself in life.
It does. It absolutely does. And that's a massive part, is transforming your environment. Because if, like you said, if you are hanging out with people who don't feel like they're enough, they're all going to self-sabotage. And what better way to affirm that you're not enough by getting yourself mixed up with people who are going to, affirm that for you. And especially like with a partner who does that sort of stuff to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the first things I did was I actually pulled myself out of all the domestic violence Facebook groups, because everyone in there was a victim.
Yeah.
Including myself. So we would tell our story over and over and over again. And that does nothing to help you move on. Yeah, you're sharing the story, but you're sharing it with a lot of victims, and there's no victor story there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's a powerful insight. That's something I've never really thought about before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. A couple quick questions, buddy, and we'll wrap up.
Yep.
Knowing everything that you've been through, and there's been a hell of a lot, you've had to overcome a lot. What would you say the quality of your life is like now?
It's amazing, really. I've remarried. I have an amazing husband who lets me go off on 4-week speaking tours. Because you believe in who you are, you just have a bounce in your step rather than dragging yourself around. And that might be one thing that I'd love to mention, though, too. I was always measured at 156 centimetres, but now that I'm out of that relationship, and I don't think I grew after 40, I'm now 162 centimetres, and that's basically because I stand tall, my shoulders are back, my heart is open, I'm not closed off to people anymore.
Wow.
And I think that makes a huge difference to how people even see you walking down the street.
Yeah, of course. I think Jordan Peterson talks about that being the lobster, putting your chest out, and of course like that raises your testosterone as well, those sort of like power poses.
Yeah,
So it definitely makes a difference. What have you added to your life or removed from it that's improved the quality of it?
So that's a work in progress every day. I don't remove people, but I tend to spend less time with them if they drag me down. I eat healthy. That's probably one of my main things. I have a good, healthy diet, and I really watch what the intake is. So I'm not one of those that just goes, oh my God, I can't ever eat sugar again or anything like that. But I am kind to myself and kind to my body. And people ask me how I've lost so much weight, but it's basically by starting to love yourself internally as well. So I look after my health in that respect, and I surround myself with people that I love. whether that be, and we do have the technology to do that now, because I live, like, if you could see out the window that I'm looking at, you can't see anything except paddocks. So with the availability of things like Skype and Zoom and Facebook and those sorts of things, you can surround yourself with kind, loving people without having that physical contact all of the time. So putting yourself first is a huge thing. Allowing yourself, because I do a lot of work with Happiness Co now, and every Wednesday is my self-love day. So whether I'm going out getting my nails done or having a haircut or a massage, or whether it's just chilling in front of the fire watching Netflix, having that time for myself and really enjoying my own company.
That's amazing. And it's cool that you do that, because it's important that people understand that self-love, self-appreciation, and time spent doing that isn't selfish.
Yes, yeah. You have to be selfless to be selfish to be selfless, rather.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are you most grateful for right now?
I'm grateful right now for my husband and my son.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. Every day, yeah.
If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard, somewhere you know thousands of people would see it, what would that message be?
Live your truth.
Nice and simple. Is that a quote you have ready all the time?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's amazing. That's it, buddy. To wrap up, though, I want to acknowledge you first of all for making time, but most of all for doing what you're doing, knowing what you've been through. Seeing you speak was powerful for me, as well as I'm sure it was for everyone in that room and everyone in all 4 of those rooms that you've been in over the last month or so. So I'm just really grateful you've taken that, you started sharing, you've done this book, and you're now this ambassador and coordinator of the Ambassadors for Happiness Co. It's amazing to see where you've come from and what you're achieving at the moment. Yeah.
The little girl at the dairy farm.
Thank you so much, buddy. You have a good day, eh?
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.